Hey everybody, this is Joe with GeoVision, back with another demo tutorial video. For today's video, I will be going over a basic setup of the GeoVision VMS software. I often get asked if we have videos that show just kind of an overview of how you do a generic setup of the VMS software, such as adding cameras, getting cameras IP addressed, getting cameras set up for recording, and just the basics. So I wanted to make a quick video that gives you kind of from start to finish, here are the basics that you need to get going with the GeoVision VMS platform. Before I get into today's video, if you find the content on this channel useful, please consider subscribing to the channel and also giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps with the exposure of the channel. So again, for today's video, I would like to just dive in and show you all a basic overview of how to set up the GeoVision VMS software. For today's video, we will be utilizing the VMS 17.4.5 software, but most of what I'm showing today will apply to most of the recent versions, as well as the VMS 18.3 software, and it's also very similar to the AI Guard software as well. So let's dive in. One of the first things that you'll want to do if you have set up a 2 network card array where your PoE switch is going into one network card on the system and then your router is going into the other, is you will want to go ahead and assign a static IP address for the network card where your PoE switch is going into the system. So to do that, you can go into the network and internet settings within Windows, hit the network and sharing center, and you'll notice right here that we have 2. The top one here is our one that is connected to the router and has an internet connection. And then down below, this is the one that is connected to our PoE switch. So I can go in here, hit properties, and then open up Internet Protocol version 4. And you can see by default, it's going to be set to obtain automatically, but I'm going to click on use the following IP address. And I like to usually set this at something like, say, 192.168.0.100. But this is really up to you. The GeoVision cameras by default come out of the box at 192.168.0.10. So if you don't want to change them to a different IP scheme, then you can go ahead and set this right here to something like what I have on the screen. And then of course you'll want to put in a default gateway as well. I typically would use something like 192.168.0.1. So you can fill out this section right here and hit OK, and hit OK, and go ahead and close out all these windows once you're done. Now, the next step would be to find the GeoVision IP device utility. And if it's not already up on the screen, you can just go to the Start menu and you can just start typing it in. Just type in IP device and you'll see it there in the results list. And so I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. And when you do this, you can see obviously the screen pops up here. You can hit the Configure button right here. And you'll notice that you have a drop down where you can actually select which network card you want to scan. So we want to scan the network card that has our cameras connected to it. So I'm going to click on the one that we just assigned, 192.168.0.100. When I do that, I'll hit OK and then hit scan. And this will take just a few seconds here, but it should find our cameras. So it has now found our cameras. And you can obviously scroll down the list and you can see that they're currently all set at 192.168.0.10 with the exception of this one right here, which we had already assigned an IP address to. Now, the IP device utility is also very useful because it will show you what the current firmware is. And on the new version of the IP device utility, over on the far right, there's a column that will show you the serial number of the cameras. So if you ever need the serial number for a scenario where maybe you need to do a password reset, that is a piece of information that you will need. And I actually do have a separate video that talks specifically about that. Now, one of the first things you will need to do is you will need to get your cameras IP addressed, and it's a good idea to go ahead and get your cameras updated to the latest firmware before you get them connected into the software. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and start with assigning IP addresses. Now, there are a couple ways that you can do this. And certain models from the GeoVision product line support what I'm about to show, and some do not. So an easy option that you can do is this option right up here, Auto Set IP Address. So if I click on that, you would want to do this at first before you have assigned any new passwords to the cameras and before you have done a firmware update. So what you can do, again, is click on the Configure button there, and then you can hit assign start IP address. And let's say, for example, you want the first one to start at 192.168.0.11. You can just leave this like it is, and then it will start counting up from there. I recommend go ahead and checking the default gateway and just leaving it at that setting. And so once we hit configure, it should go ahead and start automatically assigning our IP addresses in sequential order. So we will hit configure, and then you can hit yes here, and it will go through the list of cameras. And as you can see here on this system, we have 16 cameras. So this is going to take just a couple minutes for this process to finish. And then once everything is done, the cameras will reboot, and then they will be automatically IP addressed. So we will just let this go. One thing you may notice, it may say login failed. I have noticed sometimes that even though it says login failed, it's actually still doing its IP addressing. So you can just let this go, let the cameras reset, and then come back in, and it will actually show you the new IP addresses once you scan again. So we'll stand by and let this process finish. Now, as you can see, our cameras are rebooting, and then just in a moment, we will be able to rescan, and we should see the cameras now updated with a new IP address assigned to them. So now I have done the IP addressing. As you can see here, even though it did say failed, again, it does do that sometimes, but it will go ahead and complete the process. And now you can see it'll go through and it'll say that all your cameras here have their own unique IP address. Once you do the scan again, you'll notice that they are there. Now, you may not see all your cameras come back immediately because some of the cameras may still be rebooting. So just scan again after a minute or so, and then you should see your cameras come in. Now, the next step that you do need to do is you do need to change your default password on these cameras. This is a new feature that is added in for just extra layers of security. You want to make sure you get something assigned other than the default password that comes with the cameras out of the box. And that password, by the way, is admin, all lowercase. So there are a couple ways that you can assign a password. And one thing that you could just do would be to click on the IP address, just left click on it. You'll see this window comes up here. And then you can just go ahead and type in the password that you want to use. Now you can see it's going to give you a password strength indicator, and it will give you some guidelines here of what you need to use. And this is another feature that can be useful if you have all the same model and you want to upgrade them to use all the same password. You can check this box right here and then hit OK, hit yes on this change password. And again, it will go through and it will automatically update the password for all of the same models. You can see here we're getting success on these. This is a different model that was already administered before we started this session. So you can see that one did say a login fail. Now, once you have done your IP addressing and also assigned the password to the cameras, the next step would be to make sure that your cameras are all on the latest firmware. So currently we are on the 1.01 firmware. And this is the GV-EVD 4701 camera. So what we will want to do will be to just go online, and one way you can just easily find it is just Google it. Just type in GV-EVD 4701, or you can go to our website and you can browse for it as well. Now, once you find it in Google, you can just go ahead and click, and then you can scroll down and hit download. This will bring you into the downloads page, and you'll see right here is our firmware. And you'll see that it is 1.03 is the latest, so you can go ahead and download that. And you can see our folder there. You can now just go ahead and click to show in folder. I like to just go ahead and throw the firmware on the desktop, so that way it's there for easy access. And now we can come back to our IP device utility, left click on the first one and hit configure. You're going to type in that new password that you utilized. And then you can click Firmware Upgrade, Browse, go to your desktop. Right there's our firmware file, hit Open. And again, since these are all the same model, you can hit Upgrade All Devices, and this will allow you to do a mass upgrade. Now let's say that you do have a scenario where you're using a mix of different models and you still want to do a mass upgrade. You can do that, and the IP device utility is smart enough to be able to recognize which cameras are the same, and it will then apply that firmware update to those same models. So you can go ahead and hit upgrade. You'll notice here that it'll take probably just a few minutes, and it'll go through and it'll do a firmware upgrade, and then it will reboot the cameras. And again, that will take a couple minutes for them to come back up. So we'll stand by for it to go ahead and do its firmware update. Firmware update has now finished. You can see that it is rebooting all of our cameras. And again, this process could take just a minute or two. So you just want to let it do its thing. You don't want to close out of the IP device utility or anything like that. Once the rebooting message goes away, you might just give it another minute for good measure. And then after that, you can go ahead and hit the search button again. And it should then scan and find all the cameras once they have finished their reboot process. And you'll notice that once they come back in, you will start to see the new firmware version. So as you can see, I scan here first. They are still in their reboot cycle. So we'll want to scan again just until we start to see our cameras come up, because again, the reboot could take a minute or two. Now we have scanned and all of our cameras are back. You'll notice that our IP addresses are all there that we assigned, and also our cameras are now all updated to the latest firmware. So once we have completed this step, we can now move on to adding cameras into the VMS software. So for the time being, you can go ahead and close out the IP device utility. And from there, you can go ahead and open up the GeoVision software. Now, if you have installed the software on your own machine, then it is going to prompt you to create an ID and a password once you open it. So just go through those prompts. If you received a system that you purchased from GeoVision, that will have already been done for you. And then you'll also notice that on the desktop, we have put a note that says the VMS login information. So it will give you the ID and password there if you need it. So once you go ahead and get into the VMS, you can first go into the toolbar and go to configure. And then you'll want to go to camera install. This is where you can add in the cameras. You'll notice that a window comes up here that says automatic setup. Now, you can do this if all of your cameras share the same password, but if you do have cameras that utilize different passwords, this won't be the best option. Now, for this demonstration, I am actually going to do the scan camera option. So what you can do here is just hit scan, and you'll want to make sure you click the drop down and select the network card that your cameras reside on, and then hit start scan. Now, you'll start to find some of your cameras here. It may not list all of them on the first scan. So what I recommend to do is just go ahead and double click on the first one, enter the ID and password, and then hit OK. And once you do that, it will give you a screen that will pop up here. And when you have the apply icon available, just go ahead and hit it. And you'll notice that it adds it to your list back here. So you will then want to just go through and click and do the same thing for all of your cameras. And again, if they all share the same password, it is much easier because you'll notice when I double click on one, it will go ahead and just populate with the ID and password already defaulted. Once you get all of your cameras completed and added, the next step would be to go ahead and put the check mark next to them so they will get connected. The easiest way to quickly do that is just to put a check in the very top option. And you'll see the status go from yellow to green once the cameras are connected. Again, this could take just a minute or so. So you'll see that we now have all of our cameras connected, indicated with a green status bubble. And on this page, there's a few things that you can do whenever you click on the settings tab. I'm going to just go ahead and click on the first one, for example. Within here, this gives you the ability to go ahead and name the camera. So if you want to just call this one, say, for example, parking lot, or really whatever name you want to give the camera, you can do that right there. You can adjust your frame rates right here. Just click the drop down. Some select cameras do not have the option and it will be grayed out. So for those cameras, it would have to be done in the web interface of the camera. There's a lot of other features that you can mess with in here. You can also change your brightness, your contrast. You can flip your image orientation if needed. And then also within audio settings, you can go in here, and if your camera has a microphone built in, you can enable to record audio. By default, audio is turned off, but if you wanted to record it, you can. General settings, you can go in here and there's some different notifications that you can set up to trigger, like if video is lost, you can invoke an alarm in the software, or you can set up to send notifications. There's some other things that can be set up in here, but for this video, we're just sticking to the basics. So once you're done with all of your settings changes, just hit OK. Give it a second before you go on to the next one, and just make sure that right here where it says location, it updates the name, just like you see there, before you go on to the next one. You can go through and do as many of these as you want and make any changes that you want. But once you are done with this section, you can go ahead and hit the X button and go ahead and just close this out. Now, the next step would be to go ahead and create a layout and get your cameras added in. So to do that, you'll go up to Toolbar and you can hit the Content list. And then on the far left side of the screen, the first section to go to would be the Layout tab. So if you expand it, you can see here there's a plus sign you can hit and hit Add Layout. And let's just create one called All Cameras. You can create as many of these layouts as you want, and you can put as many channels in as you want, all the way up to a 64-channel grid. You do have a couple different options as far as layout styles. You can either choose one of these predetermined layouts. You can choose how many divisions you want right here, or you can also hit Customize. And if you do that, it will give you the ability to drag and merge cells. So for example, let's say that we have one important camera or maybe a few important cameras that we want to display larger on the screen. You have the ability to just drag and then hit the merge button in the top left, and it will create a custom view. Once you hit OK, it's going to ask, do you want to assign cameras to this layout automatically? If you hit yes, it will go ahead and just randomly throw the cameras in from 1 all the way up to the highest number of cameras. Or if you hit no, it gives you the ability to manually drag and drop your cameras in. So I hit no for this example, and then I can go ahead and hit the camera section. And you'll notice here, whenever I hover over, it does give you a live preview of your cameras. And then you can just simply drag and drop and place the cameras where you would like them to display. You can bring in up to 32 cameras on the free GeoVision VMS software. And then if you purchase the paid VMS Pro software, it would allow you to bring in up to 64 cameras. Once you've created your layout, you can go ahead and close this, but I will go ahead and show that you can create multiple layouts. And we'll just go ahead and make another one. We'll call this one Camera Layout 2. We'll make it a 4x4. I'll hit OK. I'll hit no here on do you want to add cameras to the layout automatically, because I like to customize where I put the cameras. And then again, I'll go ahead and just drag 1 or 2 cameras in. Now, the reason I wanted to show this is because once you drag your cameras in, it will save those cameras in the layout. And then from there, you can easily flip between different layouts that you've created. All you have to do is just double click on the name of the layout, and you'll see that it will flip you over to that layout that you just created. Now, once you are done with creating layouts, again, it will save it, so you can go ahead and just hit the X, and you can just close that out. Now, the next things I'd like to show here are some configurations and setup features that you'll want to do whenever you're first setting up the system. So first, you'll want to go to Toolbar, Configure, System Configure, and Startup. Now, what I recommend doing is checking auto monitoring, because what that will do is if the software starts up, let's say maybe the machine reboots because it lost power, and power comes back, this feature right here, auto run when Windows starts, will automatically start the VMS software. And then if you enable auto monitoring, it will make it to where the cameras automatically start recording once the software opens. So it's a good thing to go ahead and turn that on and just leave monitor all here. Now, another thing that I recommend doing if you want to remotely view your cameras when you're outside of the network is you will want to turn on these 3 network services: the webcam server, mobile service, and the control center server. Again, this section makes it to where every time the VMS starts up, those services would automatically boot. And then in a moment, I am going to show how to go ahead and manually turn on those services, and it will allow you to choose which ports you want to utilize for those services. So I'll hit OK, and that feature that we just applied would go into effect the next time the VMS starts up. Now, speaking of the network services, if we want to go ahead and turn those on, you can go up to Toolbar, and then right here, Network, you can click it, and the first one you'll want to choose is Webcam Server. When you do that, you'll see a window that comes up here, and the default port is port 80. If you don't want to use port 80 and maybe you wanted to change it to say port 81 or port 8080, you can just go ahead and type in the number that you want to use here. I'm just going to leave it as port 80 for this particular machine, and then you can go ahead and hit OK. You'll want to then come back into the toolbar, Network. We now see that there's a check mark next to Webcam Server, so it is running. The next one that you will want to do is Mobile Service. So if we click on this, you'll also get the Mobile Service tab that comes up. The default port here is 56,000. You can also edit it if you need to. And another feature that can be utilized if you do not want to do port forwarding on your router is you can utilize the QR code option. When you enable this, it does give you the ability from the GeoVision GVI mobile app to scan an on-screen QR code, and you do not have to do port forwarding on your router. That's for another video, but I did just want to point out that that is an option here. Now, if you're okay with go ahead and using 56,000, just hit start and it will go ahead and start that service. And then lastly, you'll want to go back into network and then go down to control center server. And I recommend just go ahead and hitting start all service. This gives you the ability to remotely view your cameras on the GeoVision client software, which is called GV Edge Recording Manager. So we now have all of our network services enabled. And again, we did set up the startup feature to where if the VMS ever restarts for whatever reason, those would automatically kick on. Now, the next step that I would recommend configuring is recording settings. So if you go into Configure, System Configure, and then Record Setting. Once you open up the record setting, there's some other features in here that you may want to enable. One of them would be pre or post recording. So if you click on pre-record right here, this is where you can turn on pre-recording. So for example, if you wanted to have video recording before a motion event happened, you can go ahead and click on pre-record. By default, it will attach one video clip that is 5 seconds, but you can edit this time frame if you would like to do a longer clip. And then you can also enable post-recording if you want. So for example, once the motion is done, maybe you want to attach 3 seconds after that. You can do that as well with our post-recording feature. I'm not going to enable that on this system, but if you were to enable it, you'd want to hit OK, and that would save that feature. I do also recommend checking the Use Digital Watermark Protection. This authenticates the video in case it needs to be utilized in court. The next feature you'll want to do is right here at the very top where you see the Configure button. You want to click on this, and you'll get a window that comes up here. And the reason why I clicked the very top one is because when you click your drop down here, it will give you a list of all of your cameras that are in the system, and then you can flip between them, and you have the ability to make motion settings right here for each camera. Now, by default, it's going to have the camera side motion detection settings enabled. If you'd like, you can uncheck this, and if you hit Apply All, it will apply that feature to all cameras on the list. And now you can set up VMS side motion detection. So the VMS is looking for the motion, and you have the ability to customize motion zones as well as mask out regions right within this window. Now, the entire view of each camera is set to a motion sensitivity level 9, which is almost the highest. 10 is the highest that you can go, but right now the entire region is set to a 9. Let's say, for example, you have an area that you want to make less sensitive to motion. Right here on the slider, you can dial it down, and then you can just draw a box on that area, and now you'll see this region is a 3, while the rest of the view is a 9. If you ever need to get rid of that area, just go back up to the highest that the rest of the scene is at, so 9 in this case, and then you can draw a box over it, and it will get rid of that lower motion sensitivity region. If you ever want to mask out a region to where movement in that area does not trigger motion recording, you can click on the mask region option, and then you can just simply drag a box over that area, and then any movement that happens in that area would be ignored. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just delete that because I do just want to keep motion settings of 9 for the entire frame. So once you do your settings here, you can go ahead and hit OK, and then it will go ahead and start the VMS side motion settings that you have configured. One last feature that you may want to configure on here is down the bottom left, add log location. So if you click this gives you the ability to create different storage paths. So for example, if you have 4 hard drives, you would want to create a storage path for each one. And this allows you to map different cameras to different hard drives. We do recommend spreading your cameras out across multiple hard drives because a single hard drive can only handle so much data being written to it. For example, for 4 megapixel cameras, we typically recommend about 14 or so cameras writing to a single hard drive. If you're exceeding that, then you're going to want to bump up to another hard drive on the system and then allocate another set of cameras to record to that hard drive. So to create a storage path, you can just click the plus sign here. You'll see that it'll create the next number in line. And then over here above path, you can hit the plus, and you can just navigate within Windows and find the drive that you would like, hit OK, and then it would add a path. Now this particular machine that I have only has 1 hard drive, so I'm not going to add another one. But if you did and hit OK, what it would then give you is right here under the storage column, you would have a drop down when you would click here, and it would say storage 1 or storage 2 or 3 or so on. And then you could choose which cameras you want to go to which storage path. So once you get all those features set, you would just go ahead and hit OK, and then it would go ahead and apply all of those features. One last thing in the live view that you will want to do is go ahead and manually start recording for the first time. So to do that, you'll go in and hit Monitor and hit Start All Monitoring, and then it will start recording your cameras on motion. If you want to go in and review playback footage, you can hit the View Log, and you can also go into the toolbar, hit Content List. And one thing that I recommend doing when you first set up the VMS is go to the Layout tab while you're in the playback window and hit the plus sign and hit Import from Live View. When you do this, you'll see a folder right here that says Live, and when you expand it, it will give you all of the layouts that you created in the live view. You can then double click on one of the layouts and your cameras would be laid out in the exact same spot that they were in the live view. So it just makes it a little bit easier because you can easily find your cameras whether you're in the live view or in the playback view. This has been a basic tutorial video on how to set up the GeoVision VMS software. There are several other features that are included in the VMS software, but I just wanted to show a really basic overview to get you set up, recording, and running with the VMS today. For further information on our product line, please check us out at www.geovision.com.tw/US. Thanks a lot for watching.